Hello, and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin with the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski, the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing this week?
I'm doing great. How about you, Eric?
Doing fantastic.
Get a lot of sleep last night after the Super Bowl?
Not really, no. It really was an amazing game. Yeah, and I mean, talk about right down to the end. I mean, it was down to 8 seconds, you know.
No, I mean Kansas City. That's the same thing they did in the championship game against Cincinnati. But yeah, two last second field goals to win. And but yesterday they really deserved to win because they totally dominated the second half, scored on every single drive, and but it was another great game. What can we say? And congratulations to Patrick Mahomes and Reed, the coach. He's been around forever. So it's we'll see what happens,
It
but they could be the new Patriots. You never.
could be. But you really have to hand it to Mahomes because he came out there. Everybody knew he had injured his ankle going into the game. He re-injured it at the end of the first half, and still nothing stopped him.
No, and it looked bad right after he did. I mean, he was hardly able to walk off the field, but then you had the half-hour Super Bowl show, and he was unbelievable. MVP for the game, second half. So he's
Yeah,
amazing.
and I mean both teams actually set a number of Super Bowl records. Longest return of a punt. Um, the Eagles quarterback was it most touchdown passes. Mahomes got a number of. It was just amazing, both teams,
Yeah,
and the
hurt.
fact
Yeah, it was just
and
amazing.
and the fact that it came down to the wire was great.
Yep, it's always fun. A lot of times Super Bowls aren't that way, but the last couple have been pretty good.
So I just mentioned Mahomes on the ankle. You don't do that without being motivated, and what motivates most people is your why. And that's what we're going to talk about. Now, a lot of our listeners are probably familiar with Simon Sinek's TED Talk and the book that it was based on, Start With Why. But we're actually going to go a little deeper than that. And actually, Simon Sinek and two other folks wrote a follow-up book called Find Your Why. And it's a great idea to start with your why, but if you don't know what it is, it's very difficult to do. So, we're going to talk about how you find your why. And one of the things that they say in the book and that I found very interesting, because I've been to a number of events where people are asked, "What's your why?" And the most common answer is, "I do this for my kids, I do this for my family." And what Simon Sinek says is that's not your why, because your why has to be what you would do if there's no one else involved.
Yeah,
And
it's
I thought that was very interesting, and it gives it a deeper meaning because so many of us automatically go, "Well, I do this for my family to support them so that they're taken care of." But what do you do for yourself? Why do you do things on your own?
yeah. I mean, a lot of people I think mistake whys for force. And a lot of that's what people are usually, I'm doing this for. But the why is you have to search within yourself and find out what really makes you tick as far as what you like to do, what you think your purpose is, how you're going to help the world out, um, that kind of thing. I talk about my 4 P's: purpose, passion, positivity, and a plan. And that plan, that's finding your why and coming up with your purpose statement and so on. And that's really what this book is all about. So, and what it does is it just walks you through certain steps to do that. But your why is really the reason that you're here, to help out mankind and just give back unconditionally with what you're doing. And from that, you're going to be able to facilitate the rest of your life because people are going to come to you, and whether it's being compensated or whatever, you are going to be a lot happier by working your why than you would be if you're just going through the motions every day, doing it for other people without taking yourself into consideration too. I mean, if you don't really enjoy what you're doing, it's impossible to do it to the best of your ability.
Absolutely. And they also talk about there's a biologic imperative to your why. And I found this very interesting because in Start With Why, he talks about the golden circle. And for those of you who haven't seen the golden circle, it's three concentric circles. So it's a circle in a circle in a circle. And the outermost circle is what you do. The circle within that is how you do it. And the innermost circle is why you do it. But it also coincides with how our brain works. And what you do and how you do it are both in the higher, the higher centers of the brain. It's what you think about. But the why hits your limbic system. It's what people tend to refer to as the primitive lizard brain. It's where instinct is. And when your why hits your instincts, it becomes easier to actually move forward with it because you're not figuring it out once you know what it is. And you know what it is by how it affects your limbic system. Because you can make a why statement, but you'll know if it doesn't seem quite right. If it's, if you're overthinking it, you'll know it's not instinctive. But when you figure out what it is your why is, you can feel it inside you. And that's a big part of this because it's not just intellect, it's emotion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a diagram that explains the golden circle and the human biology called Start With Why. That's which I'm looking at right now. And just as you said, your why is your purpose, cause, or belief that drives all that you do. And then it says your how is the actions that you take when you're at your best to bring your why to life. And then the what's is the work you do or the tangible manifestation of your why. And going over to the human biology thing, you talked about the limbic brain, and it says that's the limbic brain drives your instincts and your feelings. It mirrors your why and your how. And then the neocortex handles a language that mirrors your what, and you need all three of those things to make everything work. So it's really just common sense, but your why, it's your purpose and your beliefs, what drives all that you can do. So
Exactly.
and the book talks about the journey as far as finding your why. And so there's another diagram that basically talks about preparing. Says really important to gather and share your stories. And what it says each of us only has one eye. It's not an aspiration, but a description of who we are when we're at our natural best. It says some clues can be found in your past, and the first step is to sieve through your memories and your experiences, looking for momentous events that evoke strong emotional responses and make a real difference in your life's organization. There are specific techniques to do that. And a lot of this is discussing things with other people, identifying themes and so on and so forth. But starting with the stories and really think about those aha moments in your whole life that have really made you who you are today. That is a great place to start finding your why.
It is, and it's so necessary. And we've actually talked about this on other podcasts because the key to this is not just talking about what happened in the story. Your story has to deal with how you responded, how you reacted. And we've talked a lot about this, of how you can control the outcome of a story by taking a step back, taking a breath, and thinking about it before you respond. Well, it's those responses that help identify your why. Because what you're really trying to do is figure out who you are at your core. And when you react, whether you take that breath or not, that's showing who you are. It's not about the events that happen, it's about how you handle them and how they affect you. What's your emotional response? What did you do to react? And when you tell enough stories, that's when you start seeing the patterns in how you react, and you really do get to understand who you are. And even if you're not trying to find your why, that's a great exercise to do to really understand yourself more. I mean, realistically, how many of us really have a deep understanding of who we are?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the more stories that you have, the closer you are going to be defining that. I mean, you have your story and I have mine, and I'm introduced every week as the Happiness and Success GPS. And that really was the fruition of me doing a whole lot of personal development work over the years, but also teaching people networking. Now, how does networking, what does that have to do with the why? Well, the bottom line is we always talk about networking as being about relationships and not sales. And relationships start from the inside. And we also are both consultants who do strategic planning for businesses and so on. And we've worked with a lot of owners who make a lot of money that are just going to work every single day, going through the motions, because all they're doing is running their business and they're not even figuring out why they're doing that. And so when you're talking about strategic planning with businesses, that's one of the questions. Why are you doing this? What is your succession plan? And so on and so forth. And most people, they don't know. And so after working with business owners to kind of pull that out of them, I just stood up one day at a networking meeting about 8, 9 years ago. And my why really just floated out of my mouth. And I actually figured out the statement later on. But I just said, "Good morning, I'm Chip Janiszewski. I'm the Happiness and Success GPS. You cannot be successful unless you are happy first. There are a lot of miserable people out there because their main purpose is the wrong thing. Their main focus is money and tangible dreams and stuff like that, rather than working on what your true purpose is." So, and everybody loved when they heard that. And all of a sudden, I said, "Wow, I got a brand," and I put this whole thing together. And part of my training thing, the positive mindset development and maintenance thing, is developing your own personal strategic plan, which starts with your why, and it continues on. And that's what this whole thing is about. So, I
Great.
actually came up with my statement doing that myself, which I use that as an example. And we will share that a little bit later on, because we will be talking about drafting and refining your why statement.
Yes. And I mean, you're a great example, because everything you do flows from your why. And when you figured out what that why was, everything else fell into place. Now, something that's also important is it specifies sharing your stories. Based on the process that Simon Sinek puts forward, you should not be doing this alone. You need to actually have somebody there to tell your stories to. And there's a very important reason for this. And actually, you and I are a very good example of this. When people tell their stories, they tend not to put an importance on certain things. People have a habit of going, "Oh, well, that was nothing, that I did that, and anybody could do it." And you sort of dismiss what you did. And we had a moment going back pre-pandemic, when we were both at a networking event, where I was talking to somebody about the fact that I was an ordained reverend. And you stopped dead in your tracks. And yet at that point, we'd known each other at least a decade. And how did I not know this? And it's because I have that habit of leaving things out that I don't, think are necessarily a big deal or necessarily important. So you need somebody that you're telling the stories to, that they can go, wait a minute, elaborate more on that. Because that outside perspective is going to bring out more than if you're just writing down stories or remembering them. It's when you have to answer the questions that the story brings up in another person that you dig deeper and really get to see who you are in total, not just, what you think is important, but the total you.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I mean, getting back to my journey through the networking and really working on their passion and purpose, because you got to have a reason for doing that. That's really what got me into this in the first place, as well as working with all kinds of business professionals that I've met over the years that really haven't thought about that. And really, it's kind of a function of where we are at the world today with social media and everything else. And all the emphasis is on material goods and achievements and so on and so forth. And what both of us do as consultants with people is we start off by saying, okay, let's take a deep breath and work on the person in the mirror. What makes you tick? What is your passion and purpose? Let's work on that first. And when I'm teaching people this, I tell them to take out a sheet of paper and write down all the great things that have ever happened to them, all the things that they're really, really good at, what they like to do, that kind of thing. And what do you think what do you want to do with your life as far as giving back? And eventually, by writing these things down, this is part of your homework, you're going to come up with your statement. And on my standpoint, uh, my big thing is teaching people to develop and maintain a positive mindset, because it's really the core of networking. It's the core of really work and everything else that you're doing in your whole life. So I eventually, after toying around with this, came up with my why statement. And really, your why statement is to do something so that something happens of benefit. And mine is to help people find their passion and purpose, developing and maintain a selfless, positive mindset, then plan for happiness and success. And I do that through my speaking, through my training, through my consulting, through my networking, and all those things. There's nothing very specific there, but I have many specific ways that I do that. But the key there is everybody has a purpose and a passion. I want to help them find that. And you got to have a positive mindset to do that and maintain that. And once you have that going for you, then I can help you plan for your happiness and success by doing what we do. So, and everybody has something like that out there. Simon Sinek had his statement in there, which is in his book also. And I don't have that thing right in front of me, but basically, he has it. Actually, he was dealing with doctor's wife says to enable people to be extraordinary so that they can do extraordinary things. That's his wife statement. Enable people to be extraordinary so they can do extraordinary things. And his hows include making it simple, seeing the wider context, embracing new ideas, building relationships, pushing the boundaries. For me, I have positive mindset development tools, smiling, and so on and so forth. The maintenance method is plain and simple gratitude. And then the other thing that you need to do is throw out all your bad habits. Plain and simple stuff, common sense for everybody. But those are the tools that I use to do that. And it's, other people develop those things too. So,
Absolutely. One thing, though, I want to elaborate on is when you're sharing your stories, it's not just the positive stories. You have to take a look at things that happen to you that aren't positive and how you dealt with them. Because, again, that goes to the core of who you are. And when you look at yourself in totality, you may be amazed at what your why turns out to be. And, how, the hows and whats will follow. Now, I put together, my why statement, which is to showcase what's possible and change perspectives so that people live a more fulfilled life and change the world for the positive. And it's when a number of years ago, I was meeting somebody and they were looking at all the things the Modern Observer Group does. And they said, wow, you do all of these things. It's so much. And I said to him, and this is actually before I had come up with the why statement, but I had said to the person, it's like, no, it's all one thing. It's just different ways of getting there. And that's what your why is. Your why is the one thing. Your hows can be many, but the whys are one thing. And of course, anybody in our audience that remembers the movie City Slickers will remember Jack Palance saying to Billy Crystal, the secret to life is one thing. And Billy Crystal asks him, well, what's that one thing? And Jack Palance said, well, that's what you have to figure out. And that's figuring out your why.
Yep. And once you have your why, the book talks about how you're going to do your why. How are you going to bring it to life? And basically, they talk about identifying what are your strengths and the ingredients required for you to be at your best. And this could be, what time of day is best for you to be working and all the other positive habits that you have. But the hows, it's really, really important once you have that there to get yourself into, your best state of mind to make those things work. So.
Yeah. What you do and how you do it will flow so much easier when you understand your why, because the why is the purpose. That's the ultimate goal. And it has to be something that resonates with you. And the why is never to make money. Because, and we've talked about this in previous podcasts, money on its own doesn't actually do anything. Money is just the vessel that allows you to do what you want to do. So when you're going out to make money, well, why are you making that money? Well, that goes back to figuring out what your why is. And your why also makes it a lot easier to set goals, because now once you understand your why, you know what you're aiming at. And when you know what you're aiming at, it's a lot easier to figure out what resources you need to do it, how you need to do it, and the different ways you can achieve it, which is, again, the hows and the whats in the golden circle.
Yep. And basically, we've talked a lot about the law of attraction. And just by living your why and giving unconditionally of your why, the money or whatever else you need to facilitate everything else going on in your life, you are automatically going to be receiving that because of the law of attraction. So it will come around to you, and it'll come around in many more ways than just money. The first place you're going to feel it right in your heart where that why came from in the first place. Obviously, you're going to develop wonderful relationships with the people that you've affected, and other things are going to come around too. And it's really, really important that instead of saying, oh, shucks, it's nothing, and so on, like we mentioned earlier, that you give gratitude for that and say, thanks, I appreciate it. It's really, really tough sometimes to receive. People just think that they're not worthy and so on and so forth. But again, your heart will tell you that you are. You'll know whether you're being arrogant or not by receiving, or it's coming around just because people are doing that. And the more people can give, and receive with heartfelt gratitude, think of what this world would be if everybody said thank you instead of, oh, it's nothing.
Absolutely. And of course, Simon Sinek in his TED Talk, in his books, points out that your why is not an abstract. It actually has concrete effects. And it's not just among people, but businesses need to have a why as well. And the example he usually gives is Apple under the control of Steve Jobs. Apple built an ecosystem that it was more expensive than the competitors. It did things differently than its competitors. And yet it built an absolutely rabid fan base that would do anything that, a new phone was being released, people would line up. It was going to be the same phone whether you got it on the day of release or if you got it 3 weeks later, but people lined up to get that phone. And it was because they identified with Apple's why. And people will identify with your why, and that's going to attract the people you need to help you achieve that why and build on your success and in turn theirs.
Yep,
So,
absolutely. What's Apple is a great example. I mean, the iPhones and other things that are out there that every time something new comes out, people got to have it. They have a following. It's just, again, the law of attraction. Once it's there, you got to have it. And that's the way things work. And yet communications and everything else that are happening as a result of that is really the result.
all right. And, what he talks about in the book is the fact that, Apple didn't come up with the first computer. They didn't come up with the first cell phone. They didn't come up with the first MP3 player. But because they connected their why to their audience, it built them into, I believe at this point, they are actually the largest company on the planet by market cap. So there are very concrete reasons why you should identify your why and follow through. Now, we are just about at the end of our time. So, Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway from this episode?
Yeah, it's develop your why statement. Going through the preparation, sharing the stories, identifying the themes, and drafting that why statement, which is basically to do something so that something wonderful happens as a result of what you are doing.
Yeah, I think for me, the big takeaway is the fact that your why statement isn't a mission statement. It's something that resonates, not just with you, but with other people. And it's who you are at your core. And when you understand your why, it allows you to do so much more. And that's what this is all about. It's doing more, achieving more, and not just running in the rat race. It's what can you do to change the world? And your why is going to tell you what it is that resonates with you. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch every episode at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. We'll see you then.